So let's talk about some of the off-season plans some of these teams have. The Giants, they've decided to go ahead and keep their GM and their head coach. But what about the Dallas Cowboys?
What about the Dallas Cowboys,
Mike
Amanda?
McCarthy, if you didn't know, his contract ends in a matter of days. Also, the Bears, Caleb Williams, they're already looking for a new head coach. So we're going to bring back in Mike Renner. We're also going to bring in our very good friend, Lige Douzable. So earlier when we talked about off-season plans earlier this week, I made you guys GMs. I'm going to make you owners and presidents now because we're going to start with the Giants, and I feel like that's where we need to start with this team. So earlier this week, John Mara came out. He told the media, look, I plan to keep both GM Joe Schoen and the head coach Brian Daboll. But then he kept flip-flopping. He was like, I have confidence in the team, but we didn't do well, so maybe I don't. I'm not really sure. Where do we start with the ownership and what they need to do, Lige Douzable?
Yeah, Amanda, I echo those sentiments that you had because my thing is, if you're not 100% confident in the current GM and head coach, then just start over. Rip the Band-Aid off. Like, you going back and forth. Now you're going to have a desperate GM, and he's probably going to want to spend a boatload of money this offseason because he essentially knows his job is on the line from your press conference at the end of the season saying, I'm upset right now, and I better not be feeling like this at the end of next year. You're essentially saying, either get it done this year in the playoffs or you're out of here. So now you got a desperate head coach and a desperate GM. So when you look at the New York Giants, right, they have to fix the quarterback position. I actually have them signing Sam Darnold in the offseason. Now, the interesting thing is, what will Sam Darnold's market be? Will it be upwards to $40 million? I just talked about it, right, Amanda? They're going to be desperate because they know they have to win this year in order to retain their jobs going forward. If you look at the Giants, they currently are going to have about $57 million to spend in the cap. So I think they'll be able to get a deal done with Sam Darnold, depending on whether he wants to leave the Vikings or not. He will be a free agent. So I liken them to take Sam Darnold because we saw Brian Daboll, what he did with Daniel Jones his first year. He led a team that didn't have a lot of talent and Daniel Jones to his best year in his first year into the playoffs. And then at the number 3 pick, I have them taking probably the number 1 player in this draft, and Travis Hunter. They need a cornerback in the worst way. They took Deontay Banks a few years ago, and he has not really met those expectations of a first-round corner. And they also, the thing with Travis Hunter as well, is that he's a guy that you can even sprinkle in on the offensive side. And me and my guy Ryan Wilson have been empatical when it comes to the draft because our first 3 picks are exactly the same. Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, and Travis Hunter. So I think you get a player like Travis Hunter who's a piece that you can use on the offense and defensive side. He'll mainly be a corner for the New York Giants, but you can sprinkle him in on the offensive side with Malik Neighbors, and you get a lot more explosive on the offensive side.
Yeah, I have to echo Leger's sentiments that I hate what they're doing in terms of putting a short-term leash on your GM and head coach. Because when that's the case, you make short-term decisions. You make decisions that are not necessarily in the best long-term interest of your franchise. That's why continuity in a front office at head coach is massive, because you can make decisions that may not give you the best chance to win right now, but maybe in the best long-term interest of your franchise. If you're the Giants right now, I don't think they're going to try to get a young quarterback. I think they're going to go get a vet because a vet gives you the best job if you're Brian Daboll of keeping your job next year. They're going to go get like a Sam Darnold, a Kirk Cousins, because they know they get a floor with those guys that's higher than Daniel Jones, but it's still not high enough to compete with the Eagles, compete with the Commanders in that division. You're trying to win Super Bowls, not save your job, in my opinion. And unfortunately, they're in a position where they're going to shoot for 8 and 9 to try to save their job. So they're going to spend all that $53 million in cap space that they have. They're going to draft a guy at number 3 overall that they think can help right now, who's maybe not necessarily your best long-term pick. And unfortunately for the Giants, 3 years from now, you may be right back in the same spot.
Poor Giants fans. Just dealing with what they're dealing with.
Same old.
I can also say the same for Cowboys fans. Living with one. I know that all too well. Another year, Jerry Jones told us the Cowboys were all in. Everyone was all excited, but then they didn't really do anything. Finished the season 7-10. Mike McCarthy just finished his 5th season with the Cowboys. His contract expires on the 14th. That's a couple days away from now. Jerry Jones is in charge of it all. Lige, what does he need to do?
He needs to get on 2 knees and beg Mike McCarthy to stay. We already saw that they blocked a potential interview with the Chicago Bears, which makes you think that they want Mike McCarthy to stay, but yet they haven't given the guy the due respect that he deserves. I mean, going into this season, 3 straight years, guys, of 12 wins or more, right? Only one coach had more regular season wins going into this year in the last 3 years, and that was Big Red, Andy Reid. So I feel like Mike McCarthy has been disrespected, and if you're Jerry Jones, you need to beg and plead Mike McCarthy to be willing to stay, because like you said, JD, he can't potentially leave because his contract is up. Also, they need to do a little bit of math work when it comes to the cap because they're kind of cap strapped right now. Terrence Steele, who is their right tackle, who has moved and fluctuated into guard, he has an $18 million cap hit. I would either trade him or restructure him because you're going to need money to bring in subsequent pieces. That way the Dallas Cowboys can go on a run. I say pay Michael Parsons. They made a mistake last year waiting to pay CeeDee and Dak, and it cost them so much more money. Pay Michael Parsons now, figure out a way whether it's more guaranteed money on his deal, front-loaded, but you got to get Michael Parsons under contract. And I wonder what Mike thinks about this. They have the number 12 pick. I have them taking either one of the top edge rushers, if they fall there, or Ashton Genty. They need a running back in the worst way. And I think Ashton Genty makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I do think this draft is setting up well for the Dallas Cowboys in their need. And as well as Jerry Jones is drafted, because he's been a good drafter over his tenure as sort of the de facto GM there in Dallas. He has mismanaged the cap to a gross degree there for the Dallas Cowboys. Just look at Dak Prescott's upcoming cap hits, and there's just no way they're going to be competitive. With like $89 million on the books next year, are you kidding me? What they have, they paid a lot to these guys because they paid it late, as Leger alluded to. They missed the boat on all these guys, not extending them earlier, going to the last minute that they had to pay top dollar. And so they're doing the same thing with Micah Parsons. The price only went up with Micah Parsons over the course of this last year, and they're going to have to pay him because without him, there is no pass rush. Zach Martin, DeMarcus Lawrence, Brandon Cooks, they're all walking. You're not going to be able to pay them. Zach Martin may even retire. Osa Odighizuwa, you may not even be able to pay him either. You got yourself into this situation by overpaying guys. I think they learned their lesson, realized we can't go out in free agency and overpay yet again and splurge yet again. But it's another offseason where if they put Micah Parsons' contract on the books, they ain't going to add to that roster, which is tough to see because the roster right now, as we saw this year, it just ain't good enough.
Yeah, Mike, as you mentioned, the longer for some of these top guys, the longer you wait, it is just the more you're going to pay here. Let's go to the Bears. One more team we want to talk about. Of course, last year they had Caleb Williams, #1 overall. He did have some growing pains. He was probably also in a lot of pain. He was sacked 68 times this season, the third most in league history. So that tells us the O-line also needs help. They also fired their head coach, Matt Eberflus, halfway through the season. Mike, where do you begin with the Bears? And I think they have, the number 10 overall pick, if I am not mistaken.
What? I begin before that because they got $80 million in cap space, and they need to spend pretty much all that $80 million on an offensive line. Tevin Jenkins, I'm re-signing him, and I'll go defensive line too a little bit, but they need to protect him, and they'll protect him too with a better offensive coordinator. I think it actually starts even before free agency. It starts with a culture-setting head coach, someone who's going to say that what happened on the field last year and what happened off the field with some of the comments that were made by some of the guys who should be leaders on that team just aren't acceptable, that things have to change from the top down in Chicago, that losing streak that they went on midway through that season just was not acceptable. So it starts with a good head coaching hire because I think they'll be able to get one. Someone's going to want to work with Caleb Williams and the talent that he showed, even if it was a very up and down season for him. So that's where it starts. And then once we get to the draft, they're drafting too far down to really peg where they need to go, and it's not a good offensive line class. So the best offensive linemen may be off the board already, and I don't want to reach on them because they're still not good enough to compete with the likes of the NFC North. So they need to shoot for the moon. They need guys who are impact players. They need a very good draft, and so it has to happen very quickly for this team because this is your window. Years 2 through 4 of the rookie contract are the window for a Super Bowl where that guy's cheap, where you can build around him, but they just need to start making good decisions and get out of their own way.
Yeah, Mike, they got to do whatever it takes to get Ben Johnson in the building and not allow him to leave, right? You're building this thing around Caleb Williams, and we've seen what Ben Johnson has meant to the growth of Jared Goff. Now, Goff was a good player before he got to Detroit, but he took his game to the next level with Ben Johnson. So to me, Chicago Bears need to do whatever it takes to get Ben Johnson in the door and not let him leave. You talked about the O-line woes. The funny thing is I did this yesterday with the crew, and I actually had Tevin Jenkins going to the Miami Dolphins because they need a guard in the worst way. And, that offensive line has been berated by the fans in Chicago. Maybe Tevin Jenkins just wants a new scenery, so he may leave in free agency. But I actually have them taking Calvin Banks if he falls to the number 10 spot. And if it doesn't fall there, then they have to go edge route. They have to get somebody that can produce on the opposite side and get constant pressure on quarterbacks. They have a few needs here and there, but this is a team that has a lot of frontline players, and they're ready to go. They just need, like you said, Mike, the right head coach to set the culture the right way, somebody that can develop Caleb Williams and take his talent to the next level as well. But offensive line, Calvin Banks, if he falls to 10, I believe makes a lot of sense.
It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the Lions offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson, because Leger, you said the Bears need to do everything they need to do to get Ben Johnson. Yesterday, we have Pete Prisco saying the Jags need to do everything they need to do to get Ben Johnson. It will be a bidding war for them. Leger.
Hey there, my friend. Let's talk about something that's been on every Cowboys fan's mind lately, Mike McCarthy. After that disappointing loss to the Washington Commanders, it feels like his future as head coach became the hot topic overnight, doesn't it? Now, here's the kicker. According to NFL insider Adam Schefter, the Cowboys aren't even close to a deal with McCarthy. Let that sink in. Not close, he said. And that's got me wondering what's really going on behind the scenes. Do you think McCarthy has done enough to deserve another chance with this team? Or is it time for the Cowboys to turn the page and look for fresh leadership? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop your opinion in the comments below, and while you're at it, let's kick off a poll. Should Mike McCarthy stay or go? Vote below. What's your take? I'll be reading every comment because your voice matters here. And trust me, there's a lot more to unpack in this story, so stick around. Alright, let's dive deeper. My friend, if you've been following the Cowboys for a while, you know this isn't the first time they've taken their sweet time with a big decision. Remember Dak Prescott? The guy didn't get his deal done until the literal start of the season. And how about CeeDee Lamb? His extension happened after nearly every other wide receiver had already inked their contracts. But here's where it gets even more interesting. This isn't just about players. The same slow approach happened with Jason Garrett back. In 2015, they waited until the final year of his contract to extend him. And in 2019, they waited again only to let him walk. So let me ask you, is this just part of the Cowboys' strategy, or are they struggling to make confident decisions? Vote in the comments. Strategic patience or plain old hesitation? I'm curious, does this slow pace frustrate you, or do you think it keeps the team from rushing into mistakes? Let me know your thoughts and stick around because the stakes are only getting higher. Now, let's talk about the real pressure the Cowboys are facing here. With each passing day, McCarthy's future hangs in the balance. You've got to wonder, my friend, how much longer the team can afford to wait. If they don't figure this out soon, the risk of losing McCarthy to another team grows every day. Teams like Chicago and New Orleans are already lining up to have a chat with him. You can bet that if Dallas doesn't lock him down soon, someone else will swoop in. Think about that for a second. If McCarthy leaves, the Cowboys will have to pivot fast and find someone to lead the team moving forward. We could be looking at a coaching change mid-off-season. And with all the potential changes in the air, who knows how that would affect the roster? So here's the big question: how do you feel about the possibility of losing McCarthy to another franchise? Who do you think would be the best replacement for him? Drop your answers in the comments. The clock is ticking and I don't know about you, but I'm starting to feel the weight of this decision. Let's just hope the Cowboys don't wait too long to pull the trigger. Now, let's talk about what Adam Schefter said. This decision could very well come down to the wire. Sounds like a high-stakes situation, doesn't it? McCarthy's future could hinge on a last-minute negotiation. For the Cowboys, that could mean weeks of uncertainty, and who knows how much pressure that could put on the locker room, players, coaches, everyone involved. Everyone will be watching to see what the front office does. And let's face it, the longer they wait, the more risky it gets. If McCarthy ends up leaving, the Cowboys will need to scramble for a new head coach, potentially making the hiring process feel rushed. That could impact the team's plans for next season. We've seen what happens when decisions are made under pressure, and not always in a good way. So what do you think, my friend? Do you think waiting until the last minute is a good strategy for the Cowboys, or is this just setting the team up for failure? Vote below. Last minute decision good or bad? I'm really curious to hear your take on this because, believe me, this decision could change the entire course of the franchise. Stay tuned because there's more to come and we're not done yet. Here we are at the crossroads. The Cowboys are facing a massive decision that could shape their future for years to come. Will they stick with McCarthy and continue building on what they've started, or is it time for a change? If they don't make up their minds soon, they risk losing him to another team, and that could lead to a whole new chapter for Dallas.